Adjust is a very broad word to describe a complete cycle of shock, rejection, anger, depression, resignation, acceptance. My sequence paralleled remarkably the pattern others have discovered and studies as to human response when notified of approaching death from illness or injury. Something was dying in me. I had long realized that the God of my childhood did not exist, at least not in the form and substance envisioned by my enculturation. However, I had deeply accepted the concept of creator and created. I had but to look around me at the elaborate and intricate order of design, of the symbiosis that made the whole process operate, the trees that grew plumb-line straight up if given the chance, that provided me and other oxygen breathers with what we needed while we fed to them unknowingly for a long period our waste products, which they needed to exist. The balance of the entire planet, whose outer filtering bands of energy permitted just the proper quantity and quality of sunlight, so critical to biologic growth. And of course the food chain. The loosh wrote explained everything very neatly. Most important, it explained the purpose, the reason for it all, the why of it. This factor had long eluded me. The loosh answer was simple and obvious. The reason was there in very prosaic fashion. We were indeed producing something of value. Loosh. If one finally was able to get past the emotional barriers involved, it became hard even then to find holes in the general concept, an explanation of total human behavior and history. That left the inspects. Were they the gardeners, the loosh collectors, or the overseers? The question tantalized and tortured me for many weeks before I finally decided I must find out one way or another. On a particular night, after great difficulty in getting 2 cycles of sleep, I awoke with a start and lay quietly in bed. Evidently, my fear of what I might find was greater than I thought, as I unhooked with difficulty from the physical, then slipped out of the second body as it hovered. I scanned for the inspec homing signal, but there was none. This disconcerted me at first, but I was determined and foolhardy. I then used the ident inspec, the total road I had on them, stretched out, focused, and let go. There was a quick, short sense of spinning movement, no impression of passing through the rings, then deep blackness, and I was motionless. Nothing more. The percept was forming that the ident I had used wasn't enough. I might be at the gate to inspect territory, but I didn't have the passport to enter. I had never tried to go to them. They had always met me. I had no percept of their reality state, therefore I had arrived only at the site of our meetings. If I focused on... A warm vibration washed through me. "Very good, Mr. Monroe. You are quite correct." I began to relax somewhat. At least I had gotten this far, and at least they didn't call me Ram. "Perhaps you would like it better if we use the ident by which we know you best. We believe you are ready for it now." Ready for it? A name. They know me best. What could that be? Ashenine. Ashenine. It was both familiar and strange. Again, that feeling of trying to recover from severe amnesia and the gentle patience of those trying to help me remember. But the loosh. "We are aware of the disturbance you have undergone. It was necessary that you experience this. It goes with the territory, as you put it." Then the loosh wrote was real. I began to flicker. It is the translation that is not real. The difficulty of placing Earth and human values properly into perspectives and energies that are not of time and space is a factor very familiar to you. I turned inward, picking up the loosh wrote. Loosh, an energy generated by all organic life in varying degrees of purity, the clearest and most potent coming from humans, engendered by human activity which triggers emotion, the highest of such emotions being love. Is love loosh? Continue, Ashenine. But according to the rote, loosh is thrown off when life ends its physical existence, when pain occurs, anger, hate. These can't be the same as love. How would you define love in your terms? I knew that would be next in the order of things, and I couldn't come up with an answer. Throughout history, great minds and greater philosophers had given it a try with only partial success, and I was none of these. I wouldn't even consider trying. But you know it exists. Love is not an illusion. I released the loosh wrote and turned deeply inward, scanning. It was easier from this perspective, or perhaps it was the presence of the inspec energy. It presented itself much as a simultaneous mixture and sequence of musical chords and short melodies, only it wasn't sound, it was patterns in colors of light, scattered among the clutter of harmony, dissonance, discord, excitement, fun, fear, and emotion, and beginning shortly after birth I had the percept of occasional surges of white, first from my mother and father, then smaller flashes I was unable to identify as to source. I kept scanning through my early years for any slight glimmer of white originating in me that put forth. To my dismay, All I could find was one small white glow for an Airedale dog named Pete. I was certain that that girl in high school, what was her name? Not even a flicker either way. Most common misconception, early manifested survival drive. I agreed. Yet I could understand why. The bright red and pink chords and urgent melody were impressive even from this viewpoint. No wonder an ignorant curl such as I was would come up with the wrong percept. I went on through the mess that was I in a fast-forward mode, and I could spot sure and solid white surges here and there of which I had then been unaware. And the reality depressed and saddened me, because I found no significant emission from me that was remotely similar. It was all coming in, and I took it and didn't respond. I finally cut it off, would go into it no further. I wasn't much of a loosh producer. Too many other color chord patterns and melodies. Except for now. I knew some strong emissions and a few points were coming out of me. Did it take that long? You understand waveforms. All come from the same baseline, the colors and the white. The difference is frequency and amplitude. I knew what they were doing, and I appreciated it. My focus was being diverted from what I thought was unpleasant back into an abstract yet trunk and roots position. Using the same stuff, interactive experience, one began to learn to express anger, pain, fear, and all the rest. And finally, hopefully, if you pass the course, a special energy waveform labeled love. Yet we don't really know what it is, and with my suspicion growing, how to really use it. A carefully designed school of compressed learning. To learn to be high-quality, loosh love producers. The fact that human physical consciousness was for the most part totally unaware of being involved in the process may be an important ingredient itself. Precious few are cognizant of the non-physical agenda, at least overtly. It was getting pretty heavy for my cognizance. Yet I began to get a very faint percept, elusive, but it was there. What would happen if the Guernsey cow did discover that her milk had value? What could she herself do with it if she didn't have a calf to feed it to? Could she save it? Could she spend it on more hay or protein vitamin blocks to lick? What if she then discovered man was taking the milk she produced? Rebel? Refuse to deliver any more milk? Then she would no longer have a pasture in which to graze, protection from wild dogs, a bull when she needed it, and most of all, no barn to go where she could get relief from the pain. Without a sense of serial time, she forgets that the pain eases eventually, perhaps even knowing she wouldn't care. She wouldn't want to mess up a good thing. Therefore, who cares? Who would care? To use your term, you can't beat the machine. The percept was still there, faint, still to be explained or satisfied. What about those who do beat the machine? There always have to be exceptions. No machine is perfect. Only one anomaly is needed to prove a statistic or create one. Are they carted off to be ground up into hamburger meat? If so, is hamburger a sort of super loosh or something entirely different? Is this also a part of the machine product, or is it rust that is scraped away and discarded? And the bull calves, what is their role? Never will be loosh producers. It takes only one bull for every 50 cows, so there's a surplus. In nature, the machine, left alone, there is a way that is automatically taken care of. The impersonality of that prospect of dominance and predation is certainly not in the winning column. Hold it there, the percept is getting stronger. There would be no loosh production without at least one bull, so he is an indirect loosh producer, vital to the method. That would infer so are grass, hay, water, minerals, and the rest. Remember your waveforms, beat frequencies you like so much. Let's see here. If a smart transmitter propagates certain waves, they can resonate with other related vibrations of like kind to form a multiple pattern, which, if thought of as light, would be white. So in and of itself, you don't have to be the end product antenna or transducer, just one of the oscillators. You may never display actual loosh radiation, but you have a vital part in its production. Remembering the scan of my early years, I felt much better. Then why are you disturbed? The percept still itched inside me. They were right. What would I do with loosh love if I had a large warehouse full of it? Hand it out? It would only come back with interest, and I would have to build another warehouse to hold the compounding growing volume. The percept surged brightly. It was so obvious. Someone, somewhere. If I could, you are not ready at this point. Ready to go somewhere? To meet someone? And in all of this, how do you fit in, my friend? If I had the courage to ask these, we are not someone, as you put it, nor are we from the somewhere you indicate. Also, we are not the keepers of the garden of earth, nor the gardeners, nor do we collect and transfer human-developed loosh energy elsewhere or when. We do not fit into any portion of the human compressed learning process. However, we have observed its generation and growth from its inception. We do participate when needed without interrupting the learning sequence. Such need is expressed when there is blockage in the flow. Such participation ultimately serves a vital need for us. I had a need to ask the question, somewhere is not the heaven of your history. It was created, as were all other systems. Then someone is a creator who was created. You are a creator who was created. Each of you does carry a small rote, as you call it, of someone who created you. Through that rote of someone, your creator, you carry a percept of the creator who created someone. I turned inward. Even with this viewpoint, it was hard to set aside serial logic. The easy percept was how the multitude of distortions, misconceptions, misdirections came about. A little knowledge can be dangerous, and human creative imagination took over from there. If there had not been a someone, humans would not exist. I went over the idea of loosh love. It must be quite a place to handle that much loosh, this somewhere. It would fall neatly into many concepts of heaven. I grew wistful. Maybe we could go just to the edge of somewhere so I could get a feel of the place or state where there was so much love, surely near it but not in it, just to observe from a distance. It would answer so much. That is not too much to ask, Mr. Monroe. We can arrange it. Close tightly. Click. Even closed tightly, the radiation was so strong that it was nearly unbearable. I felt as if sweat were pouring off me. I was melting. But it wasn't heat. And I began to heave with great racking sobs, and I couldn't understand why. Then the radiation eased, and I opened a little. There was a form between me and the radiation, shielding me, and I could perceive a corona effect all around the form from the radiation beyond. It reminded me deeply of religious paintings I had seen, only this was live and in something far different from pigmented color. This is as close as you can tolerate. We are diverting most of the effective energy patterns, which are in themselves only the random residue, the leakage, as you might call it, from the fundamental. Focus through us rather than the outer rim. It will help. With great difficulty, I narrowed and held on the center of the form, and I began to cool and calm down. Slowly, my rational and observing self began to emerge again, dominating the overwhelming emotional surge that had enveloped me. It was as if I perceived through a darkly tinted window, and I had to work continually to keep the emotion below the threshold level, the wondrous and brilliant joy, awe, reverence, melded into one, yet with flashes of each sparking momentarily, all coursing through me as I responded to the radiation, unable to prevent it and barely keeping it under control. This would most emphatically be the ultimate heaven, the final home. Observe more carefully. You're capable of doing so. I looked through the smoked glass shield that was my inspec friend, and I was grateful. For I knew if I responded to this degree from just the reflection, the leakage, the full force of the radiation would have shattered me. I was not ready for it, if this was the percept from the distant edge. There in the long view was a radiant living form of incredible size. My first percept that of a tall standing humanoid, arms outstretched in front, palms upward. But just as quickly it was not. Instead, a shining globe, edges indistinct. Behind it another, identical in appearance. Behind it another. A continuous cascade moving away into infinity, beyond my perceptibility. From each came numberless beams or rays, some huge in their diameter, others no wider than a pinpoint, all uniform in size throughout their length and beyond my percept as to their destination, some of them moving past me so close that I felt I could reach out and touch one. Would you like to do so? We will help you if needed. I hesitated, then with the warm assurance from the shielding inspec form, I stretched a part of me out cautiously and touched the smallest ray nearest me. In an instant, the shock spread throughout all what I thought I was, and I knew, and in knowing knew that I would forget if I tried to remember, because what I was could not yet handle the reality of it. Yet I never again would be the same, even without remembering, except that it occurred, and the indescribable joy of knowing only that it did take place, and the echoes would reverberate in me throughout eternity, whatever my eternity was. Gently, I felt myself being detached from the ray, and I collapsed behind the shielding form of my inspec friend. Friend? Inspec? I realized then how provincial my percepts were. I also realized how limited they were. The radiating globes, the rays emitted. You responded very well for the initial exposure. Your human loosh love energy is transmitted into the center of what you perceive. From there it is redirected into what you call the rays to the points where it is needed most. When you have progressed, we can guide you to one of the destinations so you can observe the results. My percept was not strong enough to bring any flicker whatsoever as to what exposure to the full force of such rays might be, but my human curiosity wouldn't let the basic question go unanswered, now that I had smoothed somewhat. It was created. It was always there. We have no percept of a beginning. Are you ready to return now? I turned inward and closed tightly. Click. We were back again in familiar darkness, only now it seemed empty and sterile, but the inspec energy was still beside me. Now I would have to put together a new ident for them, if they could hold up so calmly under inspec will serve as well as any other, but I couldn't let it alone. As shaken as I was, I knew I had to ask, because I had known they were greater, but how much greater now might be a depth. We are created just as you are created. More than that, it is important that you obtain from your own percept. In your own, how do you put it, time, you will find the reason for this. Suddenly I felt a strong, urgent signal pulling at the back of me. I resisted at first, not wanting to leave, but the signal was persistent. With the warm pattern of understanding from my inspec friend, I turned and followed the signal. Instantly, I was hovering over my physical body. There below me was my second body. I slid into it easily, then into the physical. My right arm was tingling due to lack of circulation. I evidently had been lying on it at an angle. I flexed the arm several times, musing as I had so many times before. Suppose there were no signal to return. How long would I stay away? Would I never return? It was then, lying there in the darkness, listening to the whippoorwill and the night crickets outside, the soft, earth-scented breeze blowing in through the open window, feeling the hot warmth of our little dog Steamboat sleeping against the soles of my feet, the even breathing of Nancy sleeping beside me, that I felt the wetness of my cheeks and a few remaining tears in my eyes. And I remembered. Not much, but I remembered. I sat up in bed, wanting to jump up and shout in incomprehensible joy. Steamboat raised his head and looked at me curiously, then dropped back. My wife shifted position as I sat up, then gradually resumed her even breathing rhythm. I would not wake her. She needed her rest and recharge. I lay back and remembered. Some time before dawn, I too fell asleep.